Well, a forthcoming press release from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power states that community concern surrounding the proposed testing of two recently modified wells in the Five Bridges area north of Bishop have prompted LADWP to reevaluate and treat wells W385 and W386, now numbered as 385R and 386R, as new wells. This is as defined by the Inyo LA Water Agreement and described in the Green Book. Now, the press release notes that the new classification means that the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power will perform a CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act study on the project to analyze whether operation will have significant environmental impacts and to avoid or mitigate those impacts if feasible. Now, said James Janata, the DWP manager of the LA Aqueduct, quote, performing a CEQA study for wells 385R and 386R is appropriate to better avoid potential significant environmental impacts. With the activation of these wells, we hope to provide water for local environmental and irrigation efforts and provide a reliable source of water for export to Los Angeles, end quote. Press release notes that the old wells, W385 and W386, were operated in the 1980s, and those were the intention of both dewatering gravel pits in the Five Bridges area and providing water for Los Angeles. Now, both wells were screened to the shallow and deep aquifer, and when operated, impacted vegetation in the Five Bridges area. Press release goes on to say that consequently, the 1991 Environmental Impact Report identified both wells as contributing to a significant impact to vegetation in the area and prescribed development of a mitigation measure to remediate the impact. Now, the mitigation measure required by Inyo County and LADWP to jointly develop and implement a revegetation plan for 300 acres identified in the report, and this mitigation effort is ongoing. Now, recently, both wells were modified and screened to pump only from a deep aquifer and will pump at a rate of less than 25% of their original capacity. LADWP anticipates that pumping from the deep aquifer and at a dramatically lower rate will protect groundwater-dependent vegetation from any impacts associated with pumping. LADWP planned to conduct a thorough test to confirm this prior to putting the wells into operation. Press release notes, however, significant opposition to the renewed operation of these wells had been received by Inyo County and LADWP, and after reviewing those concerns, LADWP, the press release notes, agrees that further study of the area will alleviate concerns and is now reclassifying wells 385R and 386R as new wells. LADWP, the press release notes, thanks the community for the input during the process. Department will adhere to the new well provisions outlined in the Inyo LA Water Agreement and in activating those and all new wells. Well, Deb Murphy filed this report. Bishop City Council delivered one surprise out of three potentially explosive topics Monday night. The two non-surprises: Interim Chief Ted Steck was appointed permanent chief of the Bishop Police Department, and the Bishop City Council accepted the revised initial negative declaration on the proposed 15-home Kingston subdivision. Now, the surprise: members pulled away from a medical marijuana grow ordinance and opted to let the state determine policy. Well, after flying the chief's position, the Bishop City Council narrowed the candidates down to 5. Both City Administrator Jim Tatum and City Mayor Laura Smith described the lineup of potential chiefs as outstanding candidates. Ted Steck won out, and we'll have more on the new chief here in just a moment. Now, the Bishop City Council also dove into the public hearing on the mitigated negative declaration on the Kingston subdivision, starting with background information from Planning Commission's Gary Schley and the revised environmental document consultant Bill Taylor. Now, the purpose of Taylor's additional study was to determine if the development merited a full environmental impact review. This, according to Bishop City Council Ryan Jones. Now, Taylor reviewed the additional impacts reflected in his study and explained the mitigation measures accepted by developer Bob Kingston. Now, Terrence Ty and Stan Wooden both pointed out discrepancies in zoning laws, the most recent of which, passed by the Bishop City Council in 2011, according to Ty, identifies the site currently occupied by Bishop Nursery as low density, which would allow a maximum of 13 homes, not the proposed 15. Other objections touched on increased traffic on Home Street with 3 public schools just a few blocks south of the development, as well as variances required on road widths within the subdivision. Now, as Jones explained prior to public comment, the council's task Monday night was to accept or not the negative declaration, zoning, and variance questions, which would be dealt with by the Planning Commission. Councilmember Pat Gardner moved to accept the revised negative declaration. Joe Pexi seconded, and the motion passed 5-0. Next step will be Bishop's Planning Commission with its recommendation coming back to the Bishop City Council. Now, we'll have more from Bob Kingston in just a moment, but we did want to talk about the surprise Monday night after lengthy discussions by the Bishop City Council and a Planning Commission session that lasted well into about 11 o'clock in early December meeting. The council opted not to put an ordinance on the books regarding growing medical marijuana. Now, with no ordinance, growers within the city limits and within Inyo County, for that matter, are regulated by state laws. Councilman Joe Pexi stuck with his firm no marijuana anything stance. Councilmember Karen Schwartz acknowledged the lack of knowledge. We're not experts, she said. We don't know the unintended consequences. I don't want to create a can of worms on something we know nothing about. Now, Mayor Laura Smith's assurance that the council could make changes, but needed to have the law in effect prior to the state's March 1st deadline. However, that deadline may not be a deadline at all. Inyo County was advised the legislature of the state would pass cleanup bills removing that deadline. The Board of Supervisors opted for a wait-and-see position, as did the Mammoth Town Council. Councilmember Schwartz said, "This feels rushed. I don't want house fires and crime, but I don't want them to make patient access difficult," end quote. In the end, Pexi's let the state do it, won the day unanimously. Well, Bob Kingston met with area media on Tuesday. Deb Murphy was there and filed this report for Sierra Wave. And Kingston addressed some of the concerns expressed by neighbors to his proposed 15-home subdivision on Home Street, as well as his commitment to keep Bishop Nursery a part of the community. Now, the meeting took place the day after the Bishop City Council accepted the revised initial study and negative declaration. The project now goes before Bishop's Planning Commission and then back to the City Council, as we said. Now, Kingston bought the nursery, operating on an LADWP lease since 1979 in the late 1990s. Kingston noted the burned down a couple of years after he bought it, and he said, "Against financial advice, I rebuilt it. This is an enjoyable business. The people who come in here are in a good place, working outside in their yards." Now, faced with competition from nurseries in Mammoth Lakes and Chalfont, Kingston was faced with a decision. Now, what made the most sense was to downsize and relocate Bishop Nursery, buying the land from DWP and using the 2.5-acre parcel for housing. Property was in escrow pending approval of the project as of last summer. Now, Bishop Nursery will stay open through the summer. Kingston said he hasn't figured out where it will go, but he said he was committed to keeping it in Bishop. Now, as for specifics on the development, the homes will be built by Kingston and sold, as opposed to earlier references that the project would be owner-built. Now, his goal is to build a consistent quality development, and from an economic perspective, Kingston said 15 lots made sense. He also said, out of respect to the people on Rome Street, all the homes on that side of the project will be single-story. Mitigation included a 6-foot fence and additional trees on the south side of the project. Homes will be sold at market value. Now, when pressed for something more specific, Kingston said somewhere in the $300,000 range. No decision has been made yet on the general contractor, but Kingston said probably won't be a local due to the size of the project. Said he wants to get started building out the project as quickly as the process allows. Urge you to please see more on all of those stories by Deb Murphy on our website, sierrawave.net. Well, as the City of Bishop press release states, welcoming new Police Chief Ted Stett, who takes over after the retirement of former Chief Chris Carter. Chief Steck came to the city of Bishop in late October last year to fill the role of lieutenant and acting chief. Now, prior to coming to Bishop, the chief spent approximately 25 years in law enforcement in Northern California, starting his career as a police officer with the city of Red Bluff. Steck then spent 5 years as a DA investigator for Shasta County before moving to Suisun City. In 2006, he was hired by the city of Suisun as part of a team whose mission was to rebuild the police department. Press release from the city of Bishop notes Ted and wife Dawn have already made their presence felt, participating in numerous community events as both spectators and volunteers. Welcome, Chief Steck, and you can see the full press release on our website, sierrawave.net. We'll be back with more news.